What amazed me was the average salary or average wage of someone in Doncaster. It's like £10,000 lower than the national average.
Yeah.
What do you think the contribution of the airport will make to the local economy and the broader economy?
Yeah, good question. So
you use the phrase, use it or lose it.
Yeah.
There is going to be no third chance, I think, with the airport. I think literally is, we're going to have to use it or we're going to lose it. Is that correct?
I think that's right. In the last 12 months, you've had the Governor of the Bank of England, the Chancellor, the Deputy PM and the Prime Minister in Doncaster engaging with our members. I think I was, at the time, the youngest ever Chief Executive of Chamber of Commerce in this country, age 33. In absolute honesty, I was like completely fearless in my career.
Why do you think Doncaster deserves our growth zone, and do you think it's really going to have an impact?
Hell yeah, is the answer to both those questions.
How have you been able to build those relationships and really turn the Chamber into being, I would say, one of the main pillars of getting stuff done around here?
You know, like any business, there's a bit of design, there's a bit of luck in these things.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Automated Analytics Podcast. Well, in this episode, we got to meet Dan Fell, who's the CEO of the Doncaster Chamber of Commerce. Now, it was a fascinating discussion. Not only is Dan the most enigmatic leader of a Chamber of Commerce I've ever met, but he really is Doncaster through and through. And it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking to him about plans for the airport, plans for the our growth zone, but also getting to know a little bit more about him. If you liked today's podcast, please don't forget to like and subscribe. You've just been awarded an MBE, Dan. How did that happen?
Well, about 7 or 8 weeks ago, I got this sort of manila-looking envelope through the door with On His Majesty's service. So immediately presumed it was like jury service or something like that. So I'm going to dodge that. But it was like a really nice surprise. Been awarded an MBE. It's a lovely thing. Nice recognition for the Chamber of Commerce and nice recognition that sort of business and what we do here in Doncaster is important.
Yeah, I think very much so. So does this mean I need to salute you now whenever I see you at a Chamber of Commerce event? Or is there a 21-gun salute I should be aware of that now we need to address you as sir? What happens to you moving forward from this?
Well, I've had a few slightly awkward curtsies off my colleagues. You know, that's a trend that does not need to continue, by the way. No, it's just business as usual, Mark. You know, there's an investiture, there's a nice little ceremony that kind of, says thanks and well done to those people who've been put forward. To be honest with you, like the pomp and circumstance part of my job is the bit I find the hardest. I feel a bit uncomfy in my skin with some of that stuff. But the nice thing for me is just the fact that, several people have taken the time out to say like nice things about me, nice things about the work the Chamber of Commerce does. And so that is the lovely part about it. Putting on a top hat and tails and going to sort of Buckingham Palace version of fancy dress, I'm less excited about in absolute candour, but it's nice to be recognised, of course.
Even so, it's that recognition because you've been at the Chamber for 20 years.
That's right.
It almost feels like man and boy, and you've been CEO for 10 years. So just taking a slight step back in time. So what led you to the Chamber of Commerce, particularly for Doncaster? What led you here 20 years ago?
So there's a few sort of contributing factors, but the simple version of the route is I went to university in Sheffield. I did English language and literature as my undergraduate degree. And when I finished, like loads and loads of people hadn't got a clue what I wanted to do after that. But I had a slightly novel approach with a little bit of help and advice from sort of family who'd got a couple of connections. And I just wrote to probably somewhere between a dozen and 20 people saying, like, this is who I am. These are the skills I've got. Like, if you've got anything you can offer me. Inevitably, resounding silence was the sort of majority response to that. I had 1 or 2 letters back saying, cheeky sod, how dare you? Got 1 letter back saying, cheeky sod, I like your style. Come and have a cup of coffee and a chat. And that gentleman was a guy called Neil Turner, and he was about to become something called the Master Cutler at the Cutlers Company in Sheffield. And he just needed a bag carrier, someone to write a few speeches for him, do a bit of research and so forth. And that's when I sort of caught the sort of economics and politics kind of bug. Neil, who sadly passed away a few years ago, I'm sure you wouldn't mind me saying this, he was to the right of UKIP. He was like a proper large-than-life Sheffield old money kind of character. And his worldview was like, you'll get an education from me, Dan, but, go back to university, go and meet all those lefty professors, get their worldview. So I did a master's in politics, and with 1 or 2 bumps in the road, that led me to the Chamber 20-odd years ago. And absolutely love it and never look back.
So did you grow up in the area then? So I know you said you went to university. So was it the poly or the actual uni that you went to?
So it was University of Sheffield.
Oh,
Not that I'm a snob about these things, but it was the red brick one.
And so did you grow up in the area then? Is that your affinity with South Yorkshire?
No, I mean, I'm sort of mongrel, to be honest. So I was actually born in Norfolk, but I think I moved out of Norfolk for the first time age 2, moved back to Norfolk. We went from there to Goole up in East Yorkshire, went back to Kings Lynn in Norfolk aged sort of 4, 5, 6, something like that, and then back up to Hull soon afterwards. So I moved around a loads, and the reason for that is because my dad was in shipping. When he finished his career, he was port director of Hull and the Humber ports. I know, an amazing kind of career in industry for someone who got 2 O-levels, one in woodwork, one in geography. So because of that, we sort of moved around a little bit, but sort of going to university was a great thing for me. We were sort of first generation, me and my brother, to do that kind of thing. Loved Sheffield, still love Sheffield. It's a great city. And by and large, I've been in sort of South Yorkshire or thereabouts since then.
Because your passion for Yorkshire, when we first met, I think it was about 3 years ago, which we'll come on to later, our first meeting, but your passion for particularly Doncaster is what warmed me to you when we first met. And so for me, obviously, one of the things that we're working on together is the application for Doncaster to be an AI growth zone.
Yeah.
What do you think are the advantages of doing business in Doncaster?
I think it's just a really exciting place, like really exciting. When I started here like 20 odd years ago, it was a place that defined itself by the things it couldn't do. It had that kind of perverse, like crap towns kind of chip on the shoulder type stuff of like, oh yay, we're like top or bottom of the list this week for, obesity or dental health or international trade or business stuff, whatever it was. Like, there's always that kind of perverse pride about being at the wrong end of the list. And then sort of, I'd say 15 to 12 years ago, something in that kind of era, like it just felt like stuff was starting to change and people started to talk about our assets, the opportunity, the pride, what we can do a bit more. And then it just felt like Doncaster really got into this purple patch. University Technical College delivered, the regeneration of the racecourse, French Gate in the city centre, achieving city status, all those kind of things. And so I think, whilst there's many, many things that make up, a vibrant and dynamic business community, which I'm fiercely proud to serve, I think there's that can-do attitude is just the absolute centre of that. It's almost like the answer is yes, what's the question? And I think businesses like yours have gotten to realise that about the area. You say, Dan, I want to put in an AI growth zone bid, and we go, brilliant. What's that? But yes, inward investors like Hybrid Air Vehicles say they want to bring, absolutely game-changing clean aviation manufacture to the area. We're like, yeah, of course, we'll make that happen and like roll out the red carpet and join the dots and, pull these organisations together. Even in recent years, with that kind of really frustrating kick in the shins of our airport closing down. Like, this is a place that absolutely did not accept that. 140,000 residents signing a petition saying they want an airport to reopen. It never happens. That's people who sign petitions to get runways to, not be built or to shut airports down and so forth. This is a place that's become really, really can do. And I think that's what makes it special.
But when you look at it as a chamber, I've never come across a chamber, and I've worked with a few different areas. I'm not originally from Doncaster, as most people know, but I've worked with a number of chambers. You work almost hand in glove with the city CEO, Damien, the mayor, Ros.
Yeah.
How have you been able to foster that? What was the tipping point? Because, unsurprisingly, you're talking about things that happened 10, 12 years ago. Hey, presto, you're the CEO. How have you been able to build those relationships and really turn the chamber into being, I would say, one of the main pillars of getting stuff done around here?
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words, Mark. They genuinely mean a lot from you. I think there's like any business, there's a bit of design, there's a bit of luck in these things. I think where we're perhaps fortuitous is we're in a growing and dynamic city with a lot happening. Therefore, there's a lot that we can sort of attach ourselves to either directly or at least a bit of a dotted line to that and get some of the reflected glory of that. Whilst at the same time, we are the only show in town, because we're not in a Birmingham, we're not in a Leeds, we're not competing with a myriad of other like-minded organisations in like for a place on the pitch. But some of this is also by design, and some of it's also because of sort of real hard work on this. Me, my team, my board of directors. We all believe passionately in Doncaster. We all believe passionately in business, and that's well worth getting out of bed for in the morning. I think particularly the relationship between us and the local authorities been interesting over the years. So, part of what brought us together was that my predecessors, not all of them, but generally had a style of sort of business representation, was standing up, chest puffed out, business is right, public sector doesn't know what it's doing, and sort of not particularly constructively sort of throwing pebbles or stones in a certain direction. And I never ever felt that urge. I always felt we were part of the same team. We worked for Doncaster first, constituent organisations second, and I very genuinely think about colleagues at the local authority like Lee Tillman, like Damien Allen, as colleagues and friends in the same way I do like Sean and Jade who work at the Chamber with that. So I think in the early days we were like, what does the city need to achieve? What can we take for the team? Like you want to open a university technical college, you've got finite bandwidth, like we'll grip hold of that and, and bring businesses together and make it happen for you. And I think the council were grateful for that leadership, grateful for someone giving them that little shred of capacity back so they could focus on something else with that. And that's what happened with City Status too. I think latterly we've matured into an even better version of that relationship where we're all comfy in our skins with the Chamber being an honest, critical friend of the local authority. And this is the strategy piece. The Chamber used to be about 50% funded through projects that the council paid for. And I'd publicly argue that, I could take the king's shilling and then still hold the kind of king to account, if you see what I mean with that. But it made it a damn sight harder, of course. And now we're at a point where the Chamber's income is 5% or maybe a little bit less from the local authority. And that means we're just fiercely independent and proud of it, which means I can be best mates with them when I need to be best mates to get stuff done, like the AI growth zone or the airport. Yep. Or if stuff's not quite right, we can challenge constructively on that, and we're free to do so.
So taking the AI growth zones example, we've helped, as have you, helped put together the application for
you've
South
led
Yorkshire.
it. You've been disingenuous. You've led the charge on that, and grateful to you for doing so.
Thank you very much. Very kind words. But why do you think Doncaster deserves AI growth zone, and do you think it's really going to have an impact?
Yeah. So hell yeah is the answer to both those questions. So, we've got genuinely, I'm not just saying it because you interviewed me, like inspiring and game-changing companies like yours, Mark. What you're doing is absolutely amazing. And like, I know you would say that, I know I would say that, but actually going to one of your House of Commons receptions, this last year or two, and hearing your clients from stateside, flying into the UK to play back to the UK that we have got the best in the world at what you guys do in our midst was a real eye-opener for me. So, we've got companies like yours, but not exclusively you guys. There are many, many others in the mix in Doncaster doing some interesting stuff that, if you like, sort of AI thoroughbreds in this space. Yep. But I think we've also seen, businesses in other sectors be really quite agile in their thinking on AI. So a couple of weeks ago, I was up in Thorn, seeing a local homegrown SME, VACX. They sort of excavate roads and such like, but instead of going in with a pneumatic drill and breaking through pipes and through trees and all that kind of stuff, this is like a ruddy great Hoover that kind of sucks stuff up. It's really clever, game-changing tech. And the application of AI in that system was just gobsmackingly brilliant, what they were doing with that. So we've got sort of AI leaders, we've got quick-moving AI adopters, I would say, in our place. But also, whilst it's not overt from this government, we're still in urgent need of levelling up in this neck of the woods. Let's not hide from that. And so, as someone who believes deeply in kind of fairness and equity, I think it's right that there's somewhere that led the charge on previous versions of industrial revolutions, that our role in coal, our role in rail. I think it's right that sort of government partners were with us to capitalise on great businesses like yours to lead the next technological revolution.
Because I think putting the paper together, what amazed me was the average salary or average wage of someone in Doncaster it's like £10,000 lower than the national average.
Yeah.
And yes, I agree with you in terms of, Doncaster's centre of trade and the coal industries. But, it's very much about positioning it for new tech.
Of course, yeah.
But also, this isn't just a badge that we want to wear. It's also bringing in new jobs, higher paid jobs. and giving people more opportunities so that they don't necessarily have to go to Leeds or to York or to Manchester to go and get that well-paid job. They can also get it in Doncaster, because that was the thing that really stood out for me, I think. And I say that because you've been instrumental in the airport, and the Chamber really has, led the charge along with local government, getting that reopened. What do you think the contribution of the airport will make to the local economy and the broader economy?
Yeah, good question. So I suppose back to that point around the skilled jobs sort of first, you go back to the 2008, 2009 financial crash, and the big plan for Doncaster was sheds, it was warehousing, it was distribution. And actually it was a defensible strategy. A job was a job for many of our communities at that point, and we had to start somewhere in terms of Doncaster's renaissance, but sort of fast forward 15, 20 years, the ambitions and the sites have moved on from that. So we do need that diversity of jobs. We do need those higher skilled jobs. And candidly, we've got double the national average of jobs at risk of automation at the moment. So that there is jeopardy here for us if we don't diversify and we don't do the kind of high skilled, cleverer stuff. And the airport, for me, will be absolutely catalytic in getting our economy to that stage. In the fullness of time, we think it'll be something like a 2 billion impact on the local economy. By local, I mean like the airport region, not just Doncaster. 5,500 direct jobs, about 6,500 other indirect jobs as a consequence of that. There's opportunities for international trade and connectivity. There are opportunities for freight and cargo. There are opportunities for more inward investors in that green aviation space, building on the track record of hybrid air vehicles. There's an absolutely massive business park around the airport. In fact, there's two. There's the airport one proper and there's Gateway East, which has investment zone status attached to it. So this will be the region's flagship economic development project. And the reason why lots and lots of people are putting, such Herculean effort into it isn't, frankly, to put back the airport that closed its doors 2.5 years ago. Bluntly, that was a failing airport that wasn't making money, was doing a fraction of the passengers it could and should have been all along, was doing a fraction of the freight it should have been doing all along. What we're working hard to achieve is the vision that was originally sold to South Yorkshire 25 years ago, and that, candidly, South Yorkshire believed in then and believes in now.
Good. And one of the things I remember we were chatting about only a couple of months ago, you used the phrase, use it or lose it.
Yeah.
There is going to be no third chance, I think, with the airport. I think literally is we're going to have to use it or we're going to lose it. Is that correct?
I think that's right. I mean, we are lucky to get a second bite of the apple with the airport. That doesn't happen often when things of that size, someone makes a big strategic decision, and this wasn't a decision made lightly or made out of malice. This was very smart people at Peel concluding that, they'd run out of time to make that airport work, and I think that probably was the right conclusion for them, but it doesn't mean that someone else can't have a go at it. So I think we've been sort of lucky to get the second bite of the apple. So I think from a local resident point of view or from a local business point of view, absolutely, it's use it or lose it. This is our airport. We're going to have to make it a success and take care of it. But the relationship between the airport and the community, there's mutuality in that. So that airport equally has to deliver for local residents and businesses, so if they want businesses to use it, it's got to fly to the places business want to go to at the times they want to fly, get them back when you want to get back, and at sort of competitive price points, and I think for me, that's the really exciting thing about the partnership the local authority have forged with Munich airports. These are internationally respected heavyweights. They know what they're doing, and they can have not quite as crude as plug and play on this, but they'll hit the ground running. They'll bring carriers and relationships with them, and hopefully South Yorkshire benefits from it.
And they're a seasoned airport operator, so you'd think they'd bring a lot of quality if you go into the proposition. And I've said this to you before, if they can find a way to get me a carrier to either Dublin, which opens up America for me, or Heathrow, because that opens up pretty much most of the world, we will use it, and I'm desperate to use it because, ideally I want to be on the first flight because I'm so proud of us as a region having an airport. I want to be seen as if we're supporting it. Now, it's not open yet. What are the hurdles left to get over? Because I think the aim is to open, is it March next year, April next year, I think is one of the aims. What's left to do?
Yeah, so most of the key bits of the jigsaw are starting to land now. So there was probably sort of 4 big things that are needed achieving this calendar year. So the Civil Aviation Authority working with Doncaster to review and then reinstate the airspace. That's absolutely critical that was done at pace, because there was a South Yorkshire narrative where we'd essentially paused the airspace and can we have it back, please? There was a worldview from competitors of that airport that Doncaster had lost its airspace and therefore had to go to the back of the queue, and that could have taken 3, 4, 5 years, and we'd have been kind of burning rent on the airport and delaying the confidence and all that kind of piece. So the Civil Aviation Authority really pleasingly is expediting that kind of airspace work. That's moving at pace. So we needed to get that done. We needed to find some grown-ups who could operate the airport. You know, I absolutely applaud forever and a day the entrepreneurialism, the tenacity of Doncaster Council in securing that 125-year lease from Peel and going at pace on reopening the airport. But the local authorities' expertise is in, managing adult social services or children's services or emptying the bins or whatever else it might be. Like they are new to running an international airport. So it is fantastic we've brought in those heavyweight operators. We needed central government support because it's just very hard to deliver macroeconomic projects of this nature without it. So really pleasingly, this last 6 months, we've had the Chancellor up in Doncaster, we've had the Prime Minister, we've had the Deputy Prime Minister, all signalling their support for the airport, and with a recent 30 million contribution into an infrastructure fund for it, which was fantastic. And then the final piece is getting the regional money signed off for this. So Doncaster has South Yorkshire has a devolution deal. Part of that devolution deal is something called gain share money. It's around 900 million quid that sort of South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority and the 4 constituent local authorities can spend over a 30-year period. And Doncaster wants to use a chunk of its gain share to support the airport. But that's not just as simple as Doncaster saying, that's my slice of the pie, can I have it, please? That's, taxpayers' money. It needs sort of a 5-way sign off for that process, just as it does when Barnsley wants to spend its money or Sheffield wants to spend its kind of cash. And we believe a positive conclusion to that process will be reached in September this year. And after that, and I'd then categorise that as like the end of the beginning in the process. That's all the kind of bits of the jigsaw in situ. Then it's kind of full steam ahead to get the airport reopen. What we won't see, and it's just kind of managing expectations in the wider world, is a sort of black to white transition. Like when we talk about the reopening of an airport, actually it's a process, not a moment in time. So it will be iterative. So people like 2XL who are on the site already doing things like border force, oil and gas spill kind of cleanups, like that will be the first activity to come back. Then we'll see kind of freight and logistics in all probability, some private aircraft coming and going. And then probably the last piece of that will be the commercial passenger side, doing holiday destinations and so forth.
But exciting nonetheless, to have that on our doorstep. Now, not wanting to put you on the spot, but there has been some talk of the council not supporting the airport, of the council, not really pushing forward the plans. But everything you tell me says that actually the council have been pushing this forward, and Ros has really got behind it as mayor. Is that correct?
I think that's absolutely right. So Doncaster Council, I have absolutely no doubts about their willingness to get the airport reopened. Up until relatively recently, I might have attached a small question mark next to some of those other local authorities or parts of the kind of governance and kind of political structures of South Yorkshire. And I sort of understand that, over in Sheffield, there's a Labour and Green coalition in power. So like opening an airport is slightly antithetical, I imagine, to at least one half of that partnership. So there's been some hearts and minds to win. But I don't think there's been significant questions over willingness. I think there's probably been a much needed period of due diligence on sort of value for money for the taxpayer, and actually, sensible questions about, if a huge property and land company like Peel couldn't make it work, just why do local authorities think they can do something particularly different with that? So I don't doubt willingness, probably a little bit of nervousness on like, can we actually do it in some quarters? And then with all these things, I think it's been a hard, complex process. I think it's been new for a lot of people. And inevitably, there's been 1 or 2 tactical missteps along the way, but that's business in its life on these kind of things. Like back to the environmental issue, like we probably should have been ahead of the curve in terms of environmental impact assessment, and then kind of telling the outside world just what we're going to do about that, and become like this absolute beacon for green aviation because of the stuff that Boeing and Rolls-Royce doing at the Advanced Manufacturing Park, because of companies like Hybrid Air Vehicles coming to town. There was an intellectual argument to kind of make and win then, but we've sort of got to it a little bit late, perhaps.
But even so, it sounds like a very supportive coalition of people to make sure that airport, or to help that airport get open, which is brilliant to see, because I think one of the things that I've learnt from, our organisation being a member of the chamber. So global AI business, why would we work with, our local chamber? Should we work with someone globally? But what you've done is, we came to you with a very specific plan
Yeah.
and said, right, we want to achieve the following things. And as a chamber, as you said earlier, you've gone out and delivered those. I've never met a chamber that has been so proactive. And I think you actually prefer members coming to you saying, right, what do you want to achieve, rather than just being a member. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it drives my staff nuts because they sort of work really, really hard on that value proposition. There's this really good value, well-crafted like pack of membership sort of services that we offer that is like legal and HR support, 75 plus events a year with great networking opportunities, like very detailed, very clever international trade support for export documentation. And then I sort of horrify all of them by never ever talking about that version of the chamber, because I'm just always interested in the off-menu stuff, about what else we can do, and someone says, I want to reopen an airport. I go, great, what role can we play in that? Someone says, I want to open a technical college. I say, brilliant, how can we help? And I think that's and that's why I think like the chamber works really, really well, because there is that uniform, well thought through stuff that's sort of off the shelf. And I try and pick my language a little bit carefully, but for perhaps some of our slightly more sort of passive members, and quite rightly, they're just interested in their ROI from their investment into the chamber. And it's like, well, you spent 500 quid a year for us, and there's like 750 quid worth of benefits back to you. Great repeat business. But we do also attract businesses to the chamber who are very civic minded, who care deeply about the betterment and the future of this city and this region. And that's where I think some of those off-menu conversations are just so helpful, because, I believe passionately in, of course, partnership working between the public and the private sector, but like, it's the private sector that pays my wages, Mark. And like, I believe in the entrepreneurialism and the tenacity and the excitement and dynamism of business. And so, of course, I want to kind of mine that expertise for ideas about where we go next.
And I think also that some of the events you run, one of the ones that is one of my favourites is MP's Question Time.
Yeah.
Because you can really put, Ed, Sally, and our other MPs really on the spot. And sometimes they get quite passionate. You don't generally get that kind of audience really with those people. Okay, we're in their constituents, but that business voice, and really the chamber is very much about, when I use the word lobbying, I don't mean it, I mean it in a very positive way, is that actually you're a very, very good lobbying body.
Yeah, I think what we do well, I mean, I also sometimes use the term sort of translation services between sort of like the business community and then the people on the other side of the table, the sort of the public sector leadership and decision makers, the politicians. And we just try and keep a toe in both those worlds and be a friend to both those worlds.
Yes.
Sometimes it needs to be a critical friend, and that's largely our sort of role to the public sector, but sometimes can be a critical friend back to the business community as well, around like, are we doing enough on CSR? Are we doing enough in skills or supporting the next generation and what have you? And ultimately we're conveners. We put people together in a room with each other. Sometimes that's business and business to forge partnerships, to meet suppliers, meet customers. Sometimes that's business and politicians, and it's bad maths, but I generally believe that 2 + 2 makes 5 in this stuff, and hopefully we sort of have got relatively good track record in this space. I mean, the last 12 months, we had the Governor of the Bank of England, the Chancellor, the Deputy PM and the Prime Minister in Doncaster engaging with our members. Like, can't really go.
Yeah, I was going to say, how are you going to beat that?
I don't think the Pope can do a lot for business in Doncaster. So, we're pretty chuffed with that. But but ultimately, this is business, Mark. That's yesterday's stuff.
Yes.
It's about what we do tomorrow that matters.
Yeah, totally. And I think if I'd like to take you back 3 years, it's almost 3 years to the day. It's actually just over 3 years when you and I actually first met.
Yeah.
Now, for our viewers and listeners, what was the opening line that you said to me? Because it's quite interesting, because you challenged me in a public forum, which at the time I thought, bit ballsy, but it gave me the kick up the arse. So do you remember that first meeting 3 years ago? Yeah,
but I don't remember being quite as provocative as you kind of played this back to me these days. But I think you sort of, you sort of stepped off a train, off a plane. You were sort of pretty jet lagged, and you were doing this presentation at like some kind of innovation seminar, wasn't it, with the universities?
Yeah,
and you were talking about the great stuff that you were doing. And I think you introduced yourself as Doncaster's best kept secret.
Yep.
And And I probably sort of muttered under my breath and somewhere, that's no bloody good, is it? Or something of that nature. But what I'd kind of got in mind, Mark, was you'd probably do a few more events and you might enter the Chamber's Business Awards or something of that kind of nature as a response to that. What I didn't expect was you'd kind of go on this kind of crusade to take Doncaster to Westminster, to, Houses of Parliament reception after reception, to lead the charge on kind of an AI growth zone bid, to sort of be the anchor tenant in the kind of Gateway 1 building. Like, in terms of like me chucking down a gauntlet and someone responding to it, you're almost taking the mick.
Well,
in all honesty, it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Keep bringing it on.
But it was interesting because at the time, and you're right about the way you challenged me. I'm a business owner in the way. I very much, the first couple of years of us being formed, to even get my head below the parapet. And you challenged me to put it above. And it's probably one of the best decisions I made, and probably the best kick up the arses I think I've ever had. Is you turn around to me and say, stop calling yourself that. It's no longer be a secret. Get out there and do it. And I think, my advice, if you're joining the chamber, for me, I get asked that, why should I join? If you're looking at it in pure ROI terms, I didn't look at it like that. I looked at, right, I've got a plan. This is what I want to do. We've been fortunate, the government has launched the AI growth zone, which is great. We've now got a badge to put on, hopefully on Doncaster. But as a member, why would I join the chamber, and what am I going to get out of it, other than being told to stop calling myself Doncaster's best kept secret? What's the chamber going to do for me?
Yeah, I mean, we're an organisation where a relative amount goes on under one roof, but so the job is to make the complex simple, and we have 3 roles in life, Mark. We're there to be advocates for business in the city, so if you think it's important that business has a voice, and if you think it's important to tackle the things that are 6 on 10 that should be 10 out of 10, like, we will step up and do that, so whether that's macro stuff like lobbying for an AI growth zone, putting a shift in to get an airport reopening, or it's on an individual business basis, you've got a planning decision that's pending, you've got a business rights appeal that you think someone should go into bat, someone needs to go into bat for you, we will help. We'll be an advocate for business, for Doncaster. The second thing we do is offer help and support, and business is full of wonderful entrepreneurial, solution-oriented people, but everyone gets stuck from time to time. You might be exporting for the first time. You might have a legal query. You might have an issue with staff retention or health and well-being. Like, whatever the issue is, generally we've got something on that menu that can help your business or to save you some money. And then we're great connectors. We bring people together, and like for most businesses, that's their version of the chamber. That they like the networking we do. They do good business on that, and more often than not, that kind of delivers the ROI alone for people. As we've talked about previously, we're also great at connecting people to the system and into politicians and so forth, and we can't do this for every member, so don't please make this the takeaway of the podcast. But I've talked about them a bit too much. But so that hybrid air vehicles, there was a point in their journey when they were just getting a bit stuck in terms of their relationship with government, and we were able to get their chief exec Tom Grundy in a green room with Rishi Sunak when he was Chancellor, and that's just because of our reach in our networks, and so we're just pretty good at sort of taking a system-wide view on stuff and either getting things to go a little bit quicker or getting them unjammed when they're jammed.
And I have to say that networking opportunity, so sometimes people get scared of it because it's, oh my God, I'm going to go into a room with other people. But you're very, very good, I think, at actually managing those relationships on a local level, getting those introductions. I mean, when we first joined the chamber, I don't think we had a single client in Doncaster. And I think we underplayed the value of the business that's in Doncaster. And now I think it's about 5-6% of our clients globally come from Doncaster, which is brilliant. But I have to say, your end of year dinner, the first time I went to that, I was invited. I can't remember who was. I was invited as a guest of somebody, and I literally sat there thinking, why am I not involved in this? Because as a business person, you do actually want recognition for all the hard work, all the hours that people don't see, the conference calls at night, the missed family events because you're doing something. But that end of year dinner is magnificent, the way you do it. And you walk in there and the buzz, I don't know actually how many people go to it, but it feels like thousands.
Yeah.
And it is just one big end of year party with some awards. Now, I know last year you actually cut your speech slightly short because people couldn't be bothered to listen to it, I think, the previous year. But for me, events like that are absolutely crucial at fostering that networking.
Yeah.
And so So if you're a new member or you're thinking of joining the chamber, what would your advice be in the first couple of months?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I sort of hate to say this because we're talking about our kind of customer base, but you get out what you put in with this. So I wouldn't join the gym. I wouldn't join the gym generally, Mark, 'cause I'm lazy. But like if I was the kind of person who would join the gym, I wouldn't join the gym and then not go.
Yeah.
So the analogy sort of stands up. So if you join the chamber, throw yourself in at the deep end with both feet and make sure that your team and your colleagues are also engaged into it because the benefits are there for the entirety of the business. So absolutely plug yourself in. We absolutely understand. Everyone hates networking. I am the chief executive of a networking organization. I hate going to new events. I kind of get a bit trepidatious about meeting new people because everyone's just human, So like, we understand that. We'll kind of guide people in and make sure it's a nice and welcoming experience for everybody. I think be specific with us about the key things you want to achieve for your organization out of that chamber membership or achieve for your city out of your chamber membership, because we all like a bit of direction and focus, don't we? And then I'd also, like you are now doing, but also like I challenged you on, tell your stories.
Yeah.
A little bit. And I think that kind of brings us back to the awards, for example. We will all probably collude in saying, oh, Doncaster doesn't bang the drum enough for itself on that, but then perhaps not recognise we have our own responsibilities to bang the drum for what we are doing in that. So, if you've got a story that's worth telling, shout about it via our platforms, or the awards specifically, get involved and enter. No one's going to give you a prize if you don't put yourself forward for it.
No, definitely. So I've known you for 3 years. I know a little bit about you.
Yeah.
But I'd like to know a little bit more about your dress sense because it's the one thing that stands out that even I, and I'm like a trousers and trainer type guy, but even I feel underdressed whenever I meet you because you're always wearing a 3-piece suit. Where's the inspiration for your dress come from?
Probably twofold actually. So I'm a mod. I like all that kind of 1960s music. I love my Northern Soul. I'm a massive Paul Weller nut, and part of that whole modernism culture. Which for me is like a really British culture, but it's that magpie British culture. It's like the best of all, like American Levi's and kind of Italian scooters and tailoring, all that kind of stuff. So, that's just like a huge part of my life. So I like that look, and it's something I'm kind of drawn to. That like well-dressed people like Paul Weller, Charlie Watts, that kind of thing. Like I just sort of like that vibe. But I suppose the other bit of this is like huge insecurities 10 years ago when I started as chief executive chamber. So like when I became chief executive chamber, I think I was at the time the youngest ever chief executive chamber of commerce in this country, age 33, which isn't much of an achievement. Like people become MPs in their 20s, whatever else, and like start amazing like billionaire kind of tech startups and stuff. But like in our world, like I was a young chief exec. In absolute honesty, I was like completely fearless in my career right up until that moment.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh my good God, like all this responsibility, that kind of dread kind of comes over you. And I looked about 12 years old at the time as well. And so there's probably an element of me that was slightly overdressing for the role, but it was like, well, this is my personal brand. This is my suit of armour, and
get out there and do it.
Sort of stuff.
Totally.
Totally. And on a practical footing, I'm what we describe in Yorkshire as Nesh as well. So I really feel the cold. So that extra layer is really welcome.
Going back to AI for a second. So you did a survey, I think it was earlier on in the year, maybe at the end of last year, about people's readiness for AI.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest challenge for a local business when it comes to AI?
Yeah, it's a very good question. In actual fact, we're about to put some more research out in the field to try and get really under the bonnet of this, because whilst I'm sort of hardwired to sort of be extraordinarily sympathetic and understanding of like the business community that we're here to serve, those who are not moving at pace in this space, I don't get it. I don't understand it because like your business won't be here, unless you're kind of at the vanguard of this stuff. But if I do like try and put that sort of sympathetic hat on, I think, SME life is just frenetic. It's so fast moving. There's so much to do. And particularly in, what are challenging times, there's, horrible stuff going on around the world, which, in terms of kind of the human tragedies of kind of wars and so forth, but that means there's kind of disruption to economies and supply chains. And then we've got the kind of tariffs coming in, we've got the kind of the COVID overhang and all the kind of other stuff that's going on. Like business life is hard at the minute. So people can be forgiven for that sort of 5% of time that used to be sort of working on rather than in the business becoming sort of 4%, becoming 3%, becoming 2%. It's hard to find the time to think about the future. So I really, really get that. And then I think the other thing, and maybe this is where there's a role for organizations like yours or support agencies like mine, is to kind of just present a bit more about the art of the possible to people, because I think it's so easy to kind of look at something and say, oh, it's not right for my sector or for my business, like, and I'm being a bit of a hypocrite here because I think the Chamber is a relatively slow adopter of some of this stuff, and there's way, way, way more we could be doing, but like, I just had to look myself in the mirror and say, why on earth as a chief exec of the Chamber am I not playing with this stuff? And the moment you start to play with it, it becomes blindingly obvious what it can do to help you out on a day-to-day basis. But the tough bit's having a go. And the courage to have a go, and sometimes the courage to put your hands up and say, like, you know what, guys, I've got to this 2 years too late, but it's better that I say that out loud and do something about it than, fester on it and be 3 or 4 years too late.
No, I totally agree, and I think it's one of those things that it can actually be a superpower to do stuff quicker. So it doesn't take as long. So just coming towards the end now. So next 5 years for the Chamber, what does that look like?
Very good question. And fully enough, you mentioned our great relationship with the local authority, and particularly like Damien Allen, the chief exec, and they do occasionally have this kind of public sector parlance that creeps in. And Damien always used to talk about the kind of 3 horizons as the kind of short, the medium, and the long term. And I was like, what you mean, like this morning, this afternoon, and the weekend? That's on my time horizon. So 5 years is a long period for us. We are definitely, it feels, at the start of a sort of a good to great journey. I think we're in good shape as an organization ourselves. The membership base is growing. We're getting things done for Doncaster. Not every chamber in this country makes money. We don't. We're not. Raking it in hand over fist kind of thing. But like we deliver very solid, very sustainable surpluses for the organization. We know we've got an increasingly stable, dedicated staff team. So like all those foundational things are in situ for us. So I'm really curious about sort of what good to great looks like for us as an entity. That will be about tech adoption. That will be about bigger and brighter events and getting more done for Doncaster. But we're an enabler, Mark. We aren't the story. The story is Doncaster, and the story is business. So like for me, I'm far more interested in the next 5 years for this city. That hopefully includes a successful international airport. It hopefully includes landing and then thriving and an AI growth zone on this. There are big chunks of land which we need to reimagine and reboot, like the waterfront, the city centre. And then I think there are some other bits of our economy which we haven't put quite as much energy into as others. So I really want to explore what else Doncaster can do to support kind of makers and manufacturers in this area, because that's a huge part of our economy. And I keep coming back to sort of creativity and culture and that whole stuff that I think is really it's just important for the sake of it, actually. Art for the sake of art is an important thing, but art as an attractor of talent to our area, in terms of the economic impact of these kind of things. Look at like Hull and Bradford and other places about city and culture. So there's definitely stuff in that space I want to play with too.
But I hope you're going to get 5 minutes to celebrate success, because I think one of those big successes, hopefully the air growth zone, another one will be the airport. And also, the accolade of an MBE. I still think you're underplaying it slightly. To get that, I think is amazing recognition of what you do for this city. And I just want to say thank you, because you work tirelessly. I know there's text messages that we've exchanged late at night, or early in the morning, or at weekends when we've chatted about stuff. And just have someone who is that passionate, and also works, as I say, hand in glove with Damien, with Roz. You get stuff done, which I think is one of the things that Damien always talks about. We've got a chamber to die for, which is great that he recognises that. But it starts with the leader at the end of the day, and you're a very, very strong leader. I'm hoping it's not just going to be about the next 5 years; it's going to be about the next 10 years for you as CEO. And I'm sure at some point you're probably going to be the oldest CEO of Chamber. But I see that as a very, very good sign, to be honest with you, because it means that you're doing such a fantastic job for the city. I know a lot of businesses in the city appreciate everything that you do, and so thank you for everything you do. We really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate your kind words, but I was very, very lucky, Mark. I found the job I absolutely loved very early in my career, and what's not to love? I get to sort of do all the fun economic development and place shaping stuff that makes people's lives and communities better. But I get to do that, politely and respectfully, without being a politician, without having to work in the public sector. And some great people who, but it frankly would do my head in that space. And I get the joy of running a small SME like the Chamber, with a great team of people, a super supportive and constructive board of directors who give me all the headroom I want, just go and have fun and just try and do some great, exciting stuff. So I've got the best job in Doncaster. It's great. It's a pleasure and a privilege.
And long may it continue. Dan, thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks, Mark.